is truly an honor to be here and to be able to honor one of our truest and greatest heroes of Ventura County who fought in World War II. You know, many of us know this, but we all call our World War II soldiers and veterans the greatest generation, and we call them the greatest generation because they did not fight for their own fame and glory and recognition. They fought because they knew it was right.
How important do you think it is that we preserve, the memories and all the contributions of the World War II generation?
Well, I think it's very important because we haven't had another war, a big war that is, since World War II. I hope they don't have another big one, because if they do, it'll be the end, because we got nuclear bombing. And then when they drop on Japan, there's evidence of what they can do.
So we all gather here today because we know the importance of Corporal Jew and his contributions, and all of the 20,000 other Chinese Americans that we celebrate along with Corporal Jew today.
My name is Arnold. I was born in June 28, 1926 at Butler, California, just near Fresno. My childhood is just going to grammar school. I went through 12th grade and then went to high school. And it's all done at Butler. In those days, it's just regular school, and it's 8 hours a day and back home. At that time, they were farming. So they were doing all kind of farm work, and they raised their children, and that was our life. Growing up at that time. I had, my parents had 12 children. So there were 6 boys and 6 girls. One of the boy next to me did not survive. So there were 11 of us living. Like everybody else, we didn't have much. We lived off the farm, and like everything else, we needed assistance, and we got a little, but life was kind of hard because during the Depression, we had no money. We just worked, and sometimes we trade things off for this or that. We had a neighbor that we traded things for milk, and they had a cow, so therefore we got milk from them. When I was growing up, my grandfather had 80 acres, and then he leased some land to plant vegetables. But when I was growing, my grandfather and the father on the farm, they had plums, apricot, peaches, grapes, other things that you find at the stores now. My grandfather came over first, then he came over when he was 18 years old in 1882. And then in he settled in San Francisco, and then up there at north, up by Auburn, north of Sacramento. Then he worked his way down to Fresno area in 1905, 06. And then back in 1912, he brought my father over. Because during that time he went back from China and forth, back and forth. And then, like I said, in 1912, he brought my father over there. My father stayed and went to school. And in 1917, he went back to China, got married, and in 1918, he brought back my grandmother, my uncle, and he and my mother. So we've been here ever since. At that time, you had the gold rush, you had a train, our United States was growing too, so I guess in their minds, they have a better life over here. But then they had the Chinese Exclusion Act.
So tell me about that.
Well, they stop them from coming in. And then they are limited. They can only do certain things. So my grandfather worked in the gold field and worked on the railroad, and when they was growing up, then they went into farming. And then there's early days, they can own land. So what they do is, as somebody else bought the land, it's on somebody else's name, but they own. World War II started back in, well, I would say it started back in '39, because that's when the Japanese was attacking China, and it was like, we didn't enter the war per se fully until they bombed Pearl Harbor. And that was December the 7th, 1941. And then, of course, we were losing ground from the Japanese. Then MacArthur had to go back to the Philippines until we geared up and everything. Then we made our drive back up towards Japan around 1945. I just finished high school in 1944, graduated. My birthday is close. By law, we had to register. So I registered, and in December the 9th, I was drafted and inducted into the service. And then I did my basic training at Camp Roberts, California. I had 16 weeks of basic training, and then we were scheduled to ship out. And most of the unit ours was shipped out, and I was left alone waiting for orders. And I didn't have any until May. It finally came. They said, "Oh, you're going to New Haven, Connecticut." So I went there, and I found out that I was transferred from the infantry to military intelligence. So went to Yale, then studied Mandarin, speaking Mandarin, not like writing character, for 4 months. And I was scheduled to go overseas. But the war ended in August. So I was assigned again to another 4 months in counterintelligence at Halliburton, Baltimore, near Baltimore, Maryland. I just spent 4 more months of study and training, and then I left for China, Shanghai, and we did investigative work there for about four and a half months. Then they decided that they need more help in Japan, so they sent me to Japan. To Kagoshima. I don't know where you heard of that or not, but I went to Kagoshima, Japan. And I stayed there for approximately another 4 months. Our job at that time was to mainly investigate the people there. Our military installation was over there. There are a lot of the personnel that come in from other areas at that time. And then the military was, they had girlfriends that they were marrying and so forth. We had to check them out, so we had a lot of investigating work on when a soldier decides to marry someone. We want to know sure whether or not they were real active during the war. So we did a lot of interviews with. So that's what we did mainly, is to make sure that our installation in that area was secured and safe. Japan was an island, and as the Japanese, well, they call them war criminals at that time. They were hiding outside of Japan, and we were looking for war criminals coming back to Japan at that time. And it was November. They said, "It's time for you to go home." So I came back to Fort Washington in Seattle, and was discharged there on November the 10th, 1946. Stayed home for a year because my timing was off, so I went back up to school in the fall of 47. So I went to San Francisco City College to catch up on my undergraduate studies for the first 2 years, and then I transferred to University of California, Berkeley, and I got my bachelor's degree in geology and geophysics. in 1952. And then, of course, I went out to work. Working in the oil industry, I went to work, and the first was at McKittrick. You know where that's at?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
That's by Taft.
Okay.
And I worked there, and then I came down here to Santa Paula. We stayed for about 6 months, and we traveled around the States again. And then in 1956, we were transferred back to here. We started the offshore drilling for oil, and that's when I bought a house and settled down here in Santa Paula. I met her in December, near Christmas time in December 1948. And then we dated and then got married in 1951 in January. He was living in, born and raised, not born, but raised in San Francisco. She was born in Portola, California. And I don't know the exact age when she moved to San Francisco, but she grew up mostly in San Francisco.
And how many children did you have?
5 over the time. Chinese Club was started before, and then they went dormant, I guess, for a few years. And then in 1971, the Jew family that lived down there in the county, they want to see how many Chinese was in this area. So they had a barbecue, and from that they had little funds left over. So, and at that time, I happened to leave the oil field and pursued a different course of employment. So I had some time and was around the area, so they elected me and started to lead that tennis club. So we started with this little few gathering, and in time we formed the club and had it registered as a non-profit educational club in 1976, I think. So then we scheduled 6 meetings, which involved from little children up to adults. It's been very important to me because there's a lot of good culture things in the Chinese culture, and it's good to be able to have a gathering so people can get together and discuss some of that culture.
Dark blemishes in the history of our country. But that is why we're here today, to say that we can do better. We want to do better. We can right our wrongs, and we can celebrate Corporal Joe for his devotion to our country.
I was mistaken for being Japanese once or twice, but when we were in the service, we didn't have it at all. They left us alone. Other than that, when we went to Japan, they didn't think anything of it. People have their own opinion, and they're prejudiced all over. They won't admit it, but it's there. So, but I've never experienced a lot of prejudice with other people.
And I will tell you that the Congressional Gold Medal is the highest award that Congress can bestow. It takes an act of Congress. 2/3 of the House of Representatives and 2/3 of the Senate have to all agree to be able to bestow this honor on an individual. It's equivalent to the Presidential Medal of Honor. They're very, very similar. One that the executive branch can give, the other that Congress can give. Today, we honor this corporal and all of his contributions. Thank you very, very much.
We owe such a debt of gratitude to our World War II veterans and the brave and transformative generation they represent. As Ventura County's only remaining Chinese World War II veteran, Arnold Ju is a local treasure, so deserving of this great honor. And I hope this recognition of his historical service to our country effectively demonstrates the appreciation and the respect we owe him. Thank you for your service to our nation.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, and distinguished members of the Congress, I stand on this rostrum with a sense of deep humility and great pride. Humility in the wake of those great American architects of our history who have stood here before me. Pride in the reflection that this forum of legislative debate represents human liberty in the purest form yet devised. Here are centered the hopes and aspirations and faith of the entire human race. The world has turned over many times since I took the oath on the plain at West Point, and the hopes and dreams have long since vanished. But I still remember the refrain of one of the most popular barrack ballads of that day, which proclaimed most proudly that old soldiers never die, they just fade away.
At this point, take life day by day. At this age, and watch my family grow and watch them grow up. I have a wonderful family. I hope they all love me.
I'm certain they do.